have another panel discussion and another very important topic, future of work after COVID. It will change tremendously within the next years because COVID influenced our world of work heavily, and also new technologies influenced the future of work. So we will hear from Grzegorz Mazurek, rector of the Leon Koźmiński Academy, and his guests about...
Yes, we will answer a few important questions. How has pandemic impacted the way we work and collaborate? Which emerging patterns will remain with us for good? And has digital transformation really accelerated? If yes, then in which sectors? So warm welcome to Grzegorz and his guests.
Ladies and gentlemen, participants of Women in Tech Conference, this is a great pleasure for me, an honor to lead a panel discussion on one of the most remarkable topics we may imagine nowadays, and the topic is the future of work after COVID-19 time. I have amazing pleasure of inviting a couple of great panelists, and please give me a second. I'd like to introduce each of you. It may take a bit more than a couple of seconds because each and every of our panelists has a great background and a great experience in the topic we are going to discuss. And I will use alphabetical order, so dear ladies, we have also one fabulous man here, and he will be the first one. So Andrea Fronzetti, Colladon, research fellow of MIT Sloan, big data expert, assistant professor at the University of Perugia, current visiting fellow at Koźmiński University, business advisor and coach. Andrea, great to have you with us. Then we have Francesca Grippa, who is a teaching professor and faculty director for the Global and Social Enterprise Portfolio. Francesca teaches courses such as business strategy, new venture creation, principles of management. The focus of her academic expertise is at the intersection of innovation, entrepreneurship, and organizational behavior. Dr. Grippa, Francesca Grippa, is also faculty affiliate at Northeastern Global Resilience Institute and visiting scholar at MIT Connection Science. Francesca, great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Then we have another two fabulous, fantastic ladies, Kasia Jakimovicz, who is Edward Mason Fellow, Harvard Kennedy School Senior Program Advisor at European Innovation Council and European Commission. Kasia, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Just a correction, I used to be an advisor for European Commission, right? Now I'm a fellow at Harvard Kennedy School as an innovation and government fellow.
Thank you for that amendment. I am absolutely positive that after today's panel, you're going to be the advisor again. Last but not least, we have Aleksandra Przegalinska, who is a Vice Rector for International Cooperation and ESR activities at Koźmiński University, Warsaw, Poland. Having PhD in philosophy and artificial intelligence, she's a great expert, renowned expert in the field, and also affiliated with a couple of remarkable universities, like again MIT. And you are just about to go to where again? To Boston again, right? Probably in the beginning of the next year.
The beginning of the next year, hopefully, if COVID allows, which is our topic for today, I will go to Massachusetts again, but not to Boston, but to Great Barrington, to American Institute for Economic Research.
So, in fact, from my side, as a rector of Koźmiński University, we have great researchers from great universities or affiliated with the great universities. So I hope that the next more or less 30-35 minutes of our discussion on the future of the work after COVID time will be very valuable, not only for researchers, but also for students, experts, business practitioners. So after this maybe a bit too long introduction, I'd like us to follow 3 particular questions. And if it's possible, I'd like to ask each of you to give 3 to 4 minutes answer to those questions. It sounds like we're going to have linear presentation of your thoughts, but I hope that we are going to have also some interactive discussions, especially in the moments when we completely don't agree with each other. After all, we create value in networks, so I hope that we're going to have also some fierce discussions on particular points of view. So, Andrea, if you would start with answering the question which I prepared as the first one, and the question is, how will the work look, and our collaboration will look after the pandemic time? Which emerging patterns will stay for good? Because I have the impression that when the COVID is over, hopefully sooner or later, in the next couple of months, we'll be anti-digital and we'll try to do everything not to touch screens, computers, laptops. But that probably will happen for the first 3-4 months, and then we'll come back to some patterns. And the question is, do you see those patterns which will stay with us forever? And if so, what kind of patterns and trends you think will be with us?
Thank you. I'm not so optimistic, but let's see about the screens. So let me tell you, when I went to the MIT for the first time and I met my tutor there, Peter, I was going to stay there at least 5 months. And after I talked to him for a few minutes, he told me to go and take advantage of my physical time in the office. So he brought me in the kitchen, basically, and showed me where I could get free cake. He knew the story of Italians and food, so he was prepared. But he also told me he would have been traveling for most of my time in the US. So he said, we kick off here, and then we keep going online. It was about 7 years ago, way before this pandemic, and something very similar happened with Francesca, who is here with us. And I have to say, things haven't changed since then. I continued working with Peter and Francesca and with other people in the world while living 7,000 kilometers away. So I think 2 factors really played a major role in making our collaboration successful. First, the face-to-face kickoff. It very much accelerated an emotional connection which would have taken longer if we were starting the relationship online. But then I asked how much longer, and the answer was 3 meetings in my experience. I tested this on many collaborations, and no, I saw that creating an emotional bond, even if directly online, is not impossible. If you think about it, many people fall in love just chatting together. Something nice happened a couple of days ago in my university in a team that never met in person, and we are carrying out an incredible, boring job. A colleague, she said, hey, we make a great team even if we have to do something very boring, and I'm having fun, and we like each other. I'm totally surprised. Andrea, can you tell me how this is even possible and that we never met online? So I'm not saying that sharing the same office or physical space is not important, but I say that in difficult times like those we are living now, we must evolve and adapt to change. This is the only way to move forward. And so meeting face-to-face, it's good to fuel virtual interactions. But then there is another second factor, that it's really about the kind of job you carry out and how you carry it out. So the amount of change and adaptation required for a restaurant owner is, of course, different from that required for a researcher. But change can indeed be positive and hide opportunities. So I have a friend who increased sales of his restaurant about 30% because he went to a smart takeaway food offer. I have to say that we also supported him with some brand intelligence reports on food. But however, for all the other activities you might want to carry out remotely, being your job or your yoga classes, I think passion is the key. So this is the second factor I always consider. Being physically together can be highly motivated, and if you don't like your job, being isolated is going to be problematic. But then I also saw people in these times doing great things, artists, colleagues, and just regular people. We have, to answer to your question about patterns, we have been tracking signals of virtual collaboration during the pandemic. We found that virtual behavior changed rapidly after an initial shock, but then they stabilized on a new normal. In particular, sentiment got lower at first in March. My colleagues felt like uncomfortable in the new situation and somehow demotivated. Positivity in their language dropped. However, the speed at which they answered email increased. They became more engaged and work substituted the pleasure of other activities. But after some time, things were quickly going back towards more stable patterns. And in the second lockdown, I'm not observing big change. So I think that this means that we become resilient. And on average, I have to say I observed that women had better reactions. They proved to adapt faster and better. So that was the nicest surprise.
Andrea, the last sentence was a game changer in our discussion. Now we're going to have great feedback from our ladies. So maybe Francesca first. Do you agree with Andrea? And what is your opinion on the permanent patterns which will happen after COVID?
Yeah, I would say I will keep my, thank you, I'll keep my response to the last remark about resiliency in women, and because unfortunately some trends, especially in the United States, but it's confirmed in other countries around the world about how many women have been dropped from the workforce is really alarming. But we, the resilience can be assessed in different ways. So we can address that later, but it's a very interesting point of discussion. Well, we really live today in what has been called the world's largest experiment in working from home. And today, there are about 80% of people who have been reported to enjoy working from home, at least from a report from McKinsey, and 40% saying that they're more productive than before. But at the same time, so we have a better work-life balance, less commuting, less time spent on the roads. It was estimated to be, at least in the United States, a saving of 44 million full work days since the pandemic. So a good saving of time not spent in the car, which for me is about an hour just to get to Boston. But I think a more important trend, and it's something that will stay, is the need for companies, for leaders to identify ways to engage and motivate employees. Because yes, we're feeling more productive, but we're feeling also more isolated, working from home, and also working from anywhere, which is a new trend, if you want. It's which gives physical flexibility, can be anywhere in addition to temporal flexibility. But the one point that people have been feeling more isolated, and so for managers, for leaders, this is really key. And this is here to stay. I mean, there 16%, according to a study on Harvard Business Review, 16% of Americans say that they will continue to work from home after the pandemic. So this is, again, as you said, it's here to stay, and we'll have to consider. So how do we engage people when they're working from home? And I mean, my team is really spread around the United States now, and I really have to, I live this every day. And so I want to mention one of the research I've been conducting with a spin-off of the MIT Media Lab, where I'm a research affiliate right now. And I was a visiting scholar, so it's still collaboration, it's continuing. And it's a work with Reef Analytics, a startup that came out of the MIT Media Lab. And what they do is they have put together a platform that has a tool called Meeting Mediator that offers participants real-time feedback on how they are interacting, how often they are speaking, whether their interaction style, how dominant they are. Am I interrupting more often, or people are interrupting me more? And so it gives immediate feedback about how the conversation is going, which is really powerful, especially and really important for example, higher education institutions, colleges, universities around the globe. That more and more are relying on remote learning, and so really finding a way to provide that feedback to faculty, not only to students, about how their meetings are going. It would be really key to help them self-reflect, to become more aware. And so this is the trend that I really think could be is a trend of deep understanding for managers and for leaders in any organization, public and private, to see how to engage and how to invest in technologies that can help us become better digital collaborators. Mm-hmm. And yes, women are probably a little bit more resilient for their tendency to care for others, to absorb more and to juggle more, especially for women who have families. But I do think that there is a toll to that it needs to be better understood. Way too many women are dropping the workforce, and it's going to be, when the pandemic started, I read that we will go back to the 1930s in terms of how women participate in the workforce. So I guess also gender representation will be something to reconsider in the workforce when everything goes back to the new normal. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. I totally back you up with this idea of challenge of engaging people at work when they work home. We see that within the trends in higher education, when we have the problem of engaging students now, meaning when they already are after many months of learning through online channels. So it's simply abundance of online content and the numbers of hours they have to spend online. Even if you are very good teacher engaging students, right now it's very difficult to keep their presence, to keep their attention all the time. And one of the trends which is growing right now is multifaceted well-being of students. And I think for universities this is a huge challenge to take care of. And Kasia was the one who had the highest smile factor in the last 20 minutes. And I wonder why. So Kasia, tell us your opinion about the patterns of work.
It's my pleasure. I don't know if I remember everything I wanted to say, but it's interesting that we are all connected to MIT. And I'm going to give you, I want to cover, we are talking about challenges, but there are also opportunities, so I want to cover both things. So about the challenges, I agree with a lot of things that was said, with some not. What I want to say that when people say that they're going to work remotely, actually, also the study from McKinsey, but also the study from Stanford says that people want to work remotely, but not only. So what we are going to, and we are always talking about new normal, but new normal is not going to be either remote work or working from home. New normal is going to be a connection of both. It's always going to be mixed. And what the studies show is that people want to have a personal connection, but only on their own basis. So it means they want to go to the office once or twice a week, and that's not going to change. But at the same time, they want to work from home, and this is the new normal. So there's going to be a bridge of both. There's never going to be one or the other. Now, because there's going to be a new normal, everybody is looking into how to bring people back to work. And it's connected to a lot of things and a lot of discussions about, first of all, how to do it safe, and I'm going to cover it because I'm working also with MIT spin-off Pawczak Foundation on digital health solutions and digital health passport and exposure notification for pandemics. We just launched yesterday in Minnesota. Today, I think it's Puerto Rico or Guam. So, so first of all, how to bring people back to work, and this, and secondly, who is impacted the most when it goes for working remotely, because obviously there are essential workers that cannot work remotely and they have to go to work, so they are more exposed to different risks. And at the same time, the solutions that are developed maybe are not the most befitted. So not only there are vulnerable populations that are more exposed to pandemics, but then they maybe don't have the remote, like digital solutions help them to go back to work, either with telemedicine or with some work solutions. So they are kind of double, there is a double inequity in that. So one of the discussions is now ongoing a lot is about so-called Just Digital. Harvard Business School just launched an initiative called Just Digital. We are exploring with MIT media equitable access to digital health and equitable access to vaccines, etc. So, okay, I kind of went a little bit overboard with discussion. So what I want to say, for example, when we talk about as I mentioned, in Pawczak Foundation, we are working on these digital solutions. And there is a huge trend now with employees to explore how they can use technology for digital contact tracing or for distance tracing. So how can we make sure that people, when they come back to work, they actually can do it in a safe way, right? Raises other concerns because you have different solutions, like we can have things like wristbands, right? That trace the difference, make sure that there is a difference between people. But a lot of employees are trying to implement their own applications, which very often impose or kind of restrict the rights of people. So that's something that we can talk about, that we are talking about solution to come back to work, but how to do it in a safe and controllable way that the employees are actually not infringing the privacy of people, right? So that's an interesting part. Coming back, because I was smiling that people, one of the speakers, people became more effective at work. Yes, that's true. And I think Andrea said that they are like now link work more doing other things. And that's also true. And that's a very risky thing, because what research says right now is that people actually work much more than they ever worked before. Partially because nothing else to do, partially because they are all the time connected, and this is why they are starting to be more reactive. But that's not how we actually want to live, because at the end of the day, we have kind of now we kind of a free working as researchers, a little bit different, but people should not work 24/7. Right, and now it's very hard for people to distinguish the limits. I think I spoke a little bit too long, so I'm gonna give the floor to our panelists right now.
Thank you. I also have the impression that our activity is one pot of soup, and in the soup.
Well, definitely a challenge, I would say, but an interesting one. To have an interesting work is always a privilege, so that's a good thing. But in fact, I wanted to talk a bit about those patterns that I think established themselves, but I'm not sure if they will stay, and perhaps at least for some of them, I would like them to stay. So I wanted to talk about something positive, in fact, during the pandemics, because I think there's so much to say about all the negative aspects of how it has impacted our lives. So let's focus a bit on the nice side, or an interesting side at least. So I would say one very interesting pattern is generally something I would call a virtualization of experiences. And obviously there's, again, a negative side to it, because I think we do long for physical interactions with humans. And that's something we definitely need. Perhaps we will be more selective about it in the future, with whom do we decide to kind of really spend time offline, because that will be something extra, a sort of premium. But in terms of, you know, those digital experiences like digital traveling, I myself, we visited virtual museums and exhibits that we never saw before. And we did that in a pretty ecological way, I would say. So that's something interesting. And I wonder to what extent VR as a technology has that readiness to provide digital experience of learning, of you know, being somewhere truly, and interacting with others, and you know, creating memories out of it. So that's for me a very interesting point. Is this technology going to make it happen at some point? I remember talking to somebody from real estate sector who told me that in the future, they don't think they will be showing apartments to people. They will be showing them the apartments, but in virtual reality, so that they can experience, you know, how this space look like, but also kind of they can arrange it according to their needs while they're looking at it as something they would potentially buy. So I find that interesting, how certain perhaps sectors like the real estate or medical sector can be transformed through VR positively in many different ways. Although, again, I would perhaps limit this technology somehow so that it does not become something that is our new reality, the only one where we kind of stay and stick around. Another thing that I think is very relevant is potential positive impact of technologies in general. So I think there is this pressure right now to, for instance, use artificial intelligence, which is a point of interest for many of us here in this panel, to become a technology for positive change. For instance, for addressing climate change. As you know, there were initiatives at the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence that many of us have worked with on climate collapse. So to really use something like AI to track what's going on when it comes to climate crisis, and to kind of try to address it. Similarly, in terms of public health, the usage of technologies there can have many benefits, right? In terms of therapeutics, diagnosis, you know, modeling the spread of pandemics and whatnot. And I think it's very interesting that, for instance, AI has been super used and investigated by businesses, but in terms of certain civilizational challenges, we have not spoken about it all that much. And now there's this pressure from society to say, okay, you have all those big technologies, use it for us, all of us. So that's something I would like to say. I'm not sure whether that's going to happen. For sure, it is happening in the medical sector, for instance. And there we see a lot of movement, a lot of new startups and whatnot. But I would like this thing specifically to say. And the third thing that I wanted to mention is something that is also very close to my heart, which is the return of open source. So I've seen that specifically in the first wave of pandemics, that people were working freely together for certain goals. I have neighbors who were working on 3D printed masks, and then they would take them to the hospitals, and they were doing that because they wanted to help. Not for monetary reasons. They were not driven by profit by any means. And that was something very interesting. I also saw people, for instance, on a data science platform called Kaggle, where they were really spending their free time, sometimes 9 hours per day, to work on the data provided by hospitals to kind of really figure out how this COVID is spreading and how to inform the general society about it. So, I mean, we've seen open source in the early 2000s as a certain promise that I think was not delivered, really, because it was transformed into sharing economy that was mainly driven by pure profit. And I do think that right now, this way of working that is not only driven by, you know, direct incentive, understood as money, is something that perhaps has come back to us. And that's also another trend that I would like to keep.
Thank you, Ola. I absolutely agree that right now technology does not have good PR. That usually it is associated with big corporations, with lack of privacy, with monetization of our data. And I think that there is a huge need of showing how the technology can create something good among people And yes, probably it's also our responsibility as researchers, because as one of you previously perfectly said, we are in one huge experiment right now. And if there are some authorities, it should be the researchers who should show the path for the future. So thank you, Ola, for that. Well, your great answers had one minus, and the minus is they were quite extensive in time. So as you know, I prepared two separate questions. So I'll combine them together and I'll add some spice to that. Because the one of the next question was about digital transformation and the last one was about AI. So watch out. Here's the question to all of you, which will be the mixture of those two plus something extra. We are in Women in Tech Summit. So the question to you is, Andrea, you're going to be the first one. The mixture of digital transformation, AI, and women. And the question is, where is the future of work for women in technology? I think about, could you give us your opinion about which industries or in which areas of IT development, like for instance IT? And if so, what hints, what paths, let's say young woman from Kazakhstan, Poland, or Belarus, or Brazil should take to go into this new development flows?
It's more challenging because we are adding things to the question, but it's, however, cool. I mean, digital transformation and AI are very close together. I think they are taking place all around, even if, of course, they are affecting some sectors more than others. What is most intriguing, in my opinion, or in my research, is how digital transformation deeply shapes our mind and way of thinking, sometimes even before becoming tangible in real life. So one of the hot topics, it's like talking about digital transformation of collaboration. We now are all very used to work remotely. Things have changed in some ways. I mean, I don't want to bother you on all the patterns that have changed our collaboration. I could also talk about meetings that are just useless, with people who want to show off or produce paperwork as a hobby, and sometimes I get very bored, but still we need to find the good thing in all that happens. And I have to say, for example, in that meetings, I improved my multitasking abilities. There was even one where I was doing a yoga class with my cam off, right? So, but there is something to answer your question about women. They get in flow and they synchronize better, in my opinion. And this is very much connected to the meetings that I see and work that I see people are carrying out virtually. And flow and synchronicity are two big keywords. So, for example, Parkinson and colleagues found that you share everything with your bestie, even brainwaves. So synchronization is often a manifestation of unintended coordination. It is part of the natural behavior of a human being and takes place so invisibly that we usually do not notice it. When teams are in sync, in our research, we observe high performance and productivity and increased cooperation and social attachment. So it is something aligned with the concept of flow that I was mentioning before. So a team is in a flow state when it performs an activity in a feeling of kind of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment in the process of the activity. So what is intriguing is that this can also happen remotely. I like the term entanglement that is borrowed from quantum physics, and it refers to a pair of particles that mysteriously change their quantum properties at the same time, even when they are physically far apart, at different locations in the world even. So from a human behavior perspective, it means that two persons can sync their behavior even when they are physically separated or not involved in a local interaction. So when they synchronize, they are in flow. And we can measure it, for example, in email communication. And flow really improves performance. And we found that in creative teams, women are really good in getting in flow. So we can combine this kind of metrics with other AI tools. In terms of AI and industries, it's gonna be complicated because now everybody wants to invest in AI, right? I read some forecasts that say that companies globally are expected to spend about $98 billion on AI in 2023. And other reports says that while some like Amazon and Google boom using AI, the majority of companies making AI investment do not report positive returns. So there it's more a matter of, I mean, Wixom and colleagues from the MIT, they would say AI alignment. I would say that you need to make a model that is reliable, makes sense, and is applicable to reality, because sometimes a beautiful model is not enough. And they are just too complicated, or they have little application in the real world. So to do this, companies, they must fully understand the people, processes, and technology involved in the target context, and the way at which the AI model will interact when contextually applied. So sometimes we have like this gap between science and real world application. So on our side, I can conclude saying how we use AI systems and what we see in the future. So we design AI systems based on the analysis of honest signals of collaboration and communication, usually. These are subtle patterns in how we interact with other people. These are unconscious social signals that complement our conscious language. And we use them to reveal intentions, goals, and values. So, for example, looking at social media posts, we understand consumers' opinions and emotions, or citizens' vote intention. And an important point is that we need to make a clever use of the information we get. We don't want to use it against people, but in favor of people. So, for example, to support employees' learning, well-being, and personal improvement. So, to this purpose, we applied, together with Francesca also, a process. We invented this virtual mirroring process, where we help organizations learn what patterns and behaviors affect performance and how to use the results to coach employees on more effective communications. And on my side, I found very promising the fact that the study of honest signals also involves the assessment of brand importance. That should be in almost real time and take into account the spontaneous discourse of stakeholders. It should not rely on the administration of time-consuming surveys. We can now look at big data to know things. I like to say, I mean, it's a quote, but we can understand how the lion hunts going to the jungle now and not to the zoo. So, for example, with my team, we developed a tool, the Semantic Brand Score, and its web app, originally meant to study commercial brands. But we discovered that this tool worked unexpectedly well to capture other real-world trends. For example, political forecasting and the analysis of the brand image of political candidates. Or we are able to capture societal trends and forecast the impact of media messages on citizens' behavior and the economy. So my conclusion is if we use consciously, AI can really extend our mind and empower our vision. I don't see it as something scary, and I don't see AI as a competitor of the human brain. I like to be optimistic and think of them as allies. And I like to think that we should learn from women more.
Thank you, Andrea. Again, the last sentence is the most provoking one and probably the wisest one. Francesca, give us your thoughts. 2 or 3 minutes. I'm sorry because we are running a bit of time, but I am sure you will be clear and concise. Please, what's your idea?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I would love to combine your provocative questions, how they were reframed here. Well, first, let me just say about digital transformation, and then I want to talk about the women and what can women do in Brazil, Kazakhstan, and other countries, here in the United States, anywhere, to really to leave an impact and really improve the world. because we are definitely best positioned to do that. So, but one thing that I wanted to mention is that a lot of the times we see when we talk about technology and digital transformation, there is a misconception in the general public, and that it's based on the use of buzzwords like digitization, digitalization, digital transformation. You know, it's a mouthful sometimes in what, but there is a lack of understanding of what really it means. And it really has an impact on how deep we can make a change. Because digitization is really taking something that was analog and making it into digital. And so it's just an example for healthcare. Kasia, I think, was mentioning, the healthcare industry. There are, I don't know if everybody knows, but something called EMR, the electronic medical records that are now helping digitalize information about the patient's diagnosis and allergies, immunization. But it's only a first step to digital transformation, because what they're doing, they're taking something that is in paper and they're making it digital. So healthcare is important because a lot of women are like employed in healthcare. So that's a sector to look at, when we want to see how women can have an impact. But what really would be different, digital transformation in healthcare means that leaders and female leaders, hopefully more and more in the future, will have to be looking at how different processes really work together. Because very often organizations have these databases with siloed data that don't talk to each other, processes that don't talk to each other. And so that's where really digital transformation happens. When you change the organizational structure, the strategy, when you don't change something just for the sake of a technology that is cool. Oh, look at it, so cool. But then it's also perceived as having, with fear of being replaced. And that's, you had a question for us about the threats and, how will be received. And so and women can do that. Women have been traditionally, characterized, by being more collaborative and more caring for others. So those communication and persuasion skills, those power skills instead of soft skills, I would call them, those communication leadership skills, we'll see women having a prominent role. So the final point, and I want to be brief, is that women have to also they have to network with themselves. I recently ran micro-credentials with my university, Northeastern University, for that it was called, it's a badge, a digital badge. It is called Demystifying the Entrepreneurial Journey. And it was with the Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative at my Northeastern University. And the goal was really to show women what they could do to become leaders in this digital transformation challenge. And the first thing to do is, of course, to provide the understanding that, yes, you can do it, but also start network and you can resources that are only available for women. So I had thought about saying so much more, but I want to keep the promise on being brief.
Thank you, Francesca.
So, Kasia, thank you.
Yes, I have the impression, thank you, Francesca. I had the impression that Kasia wanted to give her 3 arguments why women do not have future in technology.
No way. All right. So very briefly, first of all, women can succeed in any business the same way men do. It's no sector that we are in. It might be harder, but we can. And actually, digital transformation make it more possible, because now what happened, you have, as a woman, think about the world is your oyster. Right now you have access to all the words, all the mentors of the world, all the learning resources and collaborative resources of the world. So please, I'm talking to women right now, just go and use it, because in reality, and this is the positive thing I haven't talked before, in reality right now you can participate in meetings, hackathons, never have access to, because you would have to physically go to this event and you have to do it. Like I was just mentoring a hackathon for the world. It was from Lebanon. I would never do it if it was digital. So use the resources, reach out to people, seek out for mentors, and now women can do it. Seek out for mentors all over the world, because what happened, people and experienced people that before were used to one-to-one meetings suddenly adopted and adjusted to the technology, and that's good. That's them, but they are also more all talk to you. So can you hear me? I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yes, it's
It means that you have the women have much more opportunities, much more entrepreneurship opportunities. They can get mentors all over the world. They can get funding all over the world, support, etc. That's my positive message.
Thank you. Maybe Ola has some other point of view on the future of women in technology.
No, I don't have a different one, but I can definitely reinforce what was said. And I would just say that, this time is very interesting. And it is very true that the current wave of digital transformation on cognitive services and on artificial intelligence, right? It's already the next level. And what is also very visible is that organizations, institutions, and businesses that do take the risk and invest in these fields transform themselves pretty dramatically and really leave the others behind. So, for instance, a very interesting report by MIT Sloan kind of showed very clearly that those companies that neglect this next wave of digital transformation and say, okay, we can still wait, we will see when the playing field gets more even and access to this technology will be easier and cheaper, we'll just wait and see, that these companies are probably doing themselves a major disservice, because those others who decide to go on board with those technologies will be completely different sectors from what they are today. So this transformation is truly happening. But now, because of the very fact that it's happening and that it has really been speeding up during the pandemics, because that's also a part of, I think, our experience, that digital transformation really accelerated during the pandemics. So what I feel is very relevant is to, and perhaps also that's a role of, I would say, everyone, the whole ecosystem, but women can be very good at transpassing and sharing that information, is that this next wave of AI usage in organizations has to be based, as my previous speakers here have said, on collaboration. We don't want automation of work. We don't want to be replaced. We don't want technology to replace humans in their specific tasks. And also, it's very true that technology can't really do it, or can't do it well, and cannot do it holistically. But I would say that, people have a lot of fear in them, in their current professions. So the message has to be positive. We are focusing on how technologies can collaborate with you, can collaboratively deliver something with you, can create synergetic effects with what you do and what you are good at. We don't want replacements, and we don't want situations where people feel that they are left off somehow. So I think this is very relevant to say that this future is all about collaboration indeed. And the positive effects of collaboration, where you feel empowered to co-create those technologies, you are on board with the whole process, but you're also getting technologies that are for you. So in a way personalized, like Andrea was saying, right? You're not getting something that is generic for everybody. You are getting something that is tailor-made for you in a positive way, not violating any ethical standards. What I also think is that, one part is collaboration, the other is inclusivity. And it's just very pragmatic to me, because there will be jobs in these sectors, and there will be more people needed to really bring on board the transformation that we want. And because of that, it has to be very inclusive. So the message for today is that regardless of your gender or your orientation and whatnot, and your background, you are welcome in this field of technologies, and you can achieve certain accomplishments in these fields, because there are no barriers that should, keep you away from that. So to me, inclusivity and collaboration are the key notions of this new wave of, let's say, transformation that we're experiencing.
Thank you, Ola. Thank you, Ola. If I'd like to sum up somehow this amazing performance of yours, I would just use two words. The first word is hope, and the second one is optimism. So although we are in a very tough time right now, in each and every discussion we have, I had the impression that we see the good sides of that what's going on. Last but not least, I think this is a great responsibility for us to lead this positive change, which hopefully will happen when we are finally over this terrible pandemic times. So Andrea, Francesca, Kasia, and Ola, I'd like to thank you very warmly for your presence at the Women in Tech Summit, and I hope that all the panelists and all the participants of our event had a great pleasure and value and fun of spending the time. So thank you guys, and keep safe, and let's work, let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.